You are sitting in the lobby, the air conditioning is, just slightly too aggressive.
Oh, it always is. It's like they want you to freeze.
Right. And your palms are inexplicably sweating. You're leaving these damp, awful little imprints on the leather portfolio you bought specifically for this occasion.
The quintessential interview portfolio.
Exactly. You're wearing a suit that feels a bit like a costume, and the silence in the room is just suffocating.
And then there is that inexorable ticking of the wall clock. Just this relentless, rhythmic countdown to the interrogation.
Inexorable. That is the
Yeah.
perfect word for it.
I actually love the energy of that specific word there. Because, I mean, it's not just that the clock is unstoppable, right? It's that it is entirely indifferent to your anxiety. It just keeps ticking, completely apathetic to your visceral panic.
It really is an indifferent cruelty. You look down at your meticulously formatted resume, the bullet points you spent hours agonizing over, optimizing the data, and suddenly this wave of dread sets in.
But you realize you're a commodity.
Yes, because you realize that on paper, you look exactly like the 50 other candidates applying for this position. You have the same degree, the same pedestrian qualifications, the same baseline competencies. You are just waiting for your name to be called.
It's a universally terrifying shared experience. We essentially strip away our humanity, we flatten our entire lived experience into a single sheet of cardstock, and we just sit there hoping it's enough to be chosen.
It's inherently degrading.
It is. But if we shift our perspective for just a moment, the person sitting on the other side of that desk is experiencing their own subtle form of dread.
Wait, really? You think the interviewer is scared?
Absolutely. They are terrified of making a bad hire. A bad hire is a massive structural failure for them. The asymmetry of the interview table makes us forget that they have stakes in this too.
Which brings us perfectly to our mission today. We are taking a deep dive into the underlying architecture of a successful interview. We're going to deconstruct that traditional robotic script and figure out how to transform you from a passive job seeker into an undeniable problem solver.
I love that framing.
And I want to address you directly right now, you listening to this. I want you to imagine you are sitting right here in the studio with us, prepping for your next big career move. Because this isn't about memorizing the right answers. This is about taking control of the room.
And taking control requires a fundamental paradigm shift right out of the gate, because the natural starting point of almost any interview is that dreaded, incredibly vague prompt. You know the one.
Oh, the absolute worst. So tell me about yourself.
Yes. Tell me about yourself.
It feels like a psychological trap every single time. And the immediate knee-jerk instinct, especially for those of us who, lean heavily on structure and data to feel safe, is to just start verbally summarizing the resume.
Right, just reciting the timeline.
Exactly. Well, in 2018, I worked here, and my duties included managing these spreadsheets. Then in 2021, I moved to this company. It is a desperate grab for the safety of chronological facts.
It's a totally understandable defense mechanism, honestly. When we feel threatened, we retreat to what is verifiable. The data is safe.
But it's so boring.
It is agonizingly boring. Let's look at the underlying mechanics of that assumption. Interviewers do not want a chronological list of your past jobs. They already have your resume sitting right in front of them.
They literally just read it before you walked in.
Exactly. If you just repeat it, you are providing zero new data. And frankly, you are actively squandering your most valuable real estate, which is their fleeting attention. What they're actually looking for is the story.
Think about the last time someone explained a movie to you by just listing the Wikipedia plot summary.
Oh, that's the worst.
Well, this guy goes to space, and then there's a black hole, and then he comes back behind a bookcase. Described that way, it's just dry facts. There is zero emotional resonance. You're giving them the timeline, but completely robbing them of the tension, the struggle, and the ultimate resolution.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Watching the actual film gives you the context of how the protagonists survived. It shows you the architecture of their decision-making.
And when you just recite your resume, you are forcing the interviewer's brain to do all that heavy cognitive lifting. You're handing them raw, unstructured data points and hoping they have the mental energy to piece them together into a compelling narrative about your competence.
Which they won't do.
They usually don't. A human being's capacity to process lists is incredibly low, especially when they're tired. But our capacity to absorb and remember a narrative is practically limitless. It's how we're wired.
Wait, I have to stop you there and push back a little.
Okay, go for it.
If a company just needs, say, a database manager who knows SQL or a financial analyst who can build complex models, why do they care about a cinematic narrative?
Hmm.
Like, can't I just prove I know the math? Isn't the interview exactly where you're supposed to verify you have the hard skills required to not break their servers?
The math is merely the baseline. The math gets you into the lobby, but human beings do not make final decisions based purely on data.
We like to think we do.
We love to think we do, but we don't. We make decisions based on emotional resonance and perceived safety, and then we use the data to justify the decision after the fact.
That's a really salient point.
Let's unpack the psychology of what the recruiter is really asking. When they say, "Tell me about yourself," the core objective isn't to audit your employment history. The objective is to see how you conceptualize yourself in relation to friction.
Ah, friction. I like that.
The story works because it contextualizes your skills within a crisis. You aren't just saying, "I have 5 years of risk management experience."
Right. You are telling a brief, compelling story about a specific moment the system failed, how you intuitively analyzed the friction points, and how you engineered a sustainable solution.
Exactly. You firmly establish yourself as a problem solver rather than just a job seeker.
I want to highlight that distinction because it is structurally crucial to everything we're talking about today. A job seeker comes into the room asking for something.
Please give me a job.
Please give me a salary. Please give me health care. Please validate my worth. It is inherently subservient. But a problem solver walks into the room offering a structural fix. You have a pain point. I have a documented history of dismantling that exact type of pain point.
And that narrative of problem solving is what actually sticks in a recruiter's memory. 3 days later, when they are staring at a stack of 50 identical resumes, they won't remember your bullet points.
They all blur together.
They do, but they will remember the story of how you stabilized a crashing server on a Friday night while everyone else was panicking.
It shifts your own internal posture, too. When you view yourself as a problem solver, you aren't begging for a job. You're consulting on a solution. It entirely changes the geometry of the room.
It does. It levels the playing field. But, and here's the catch, once you tell that compelling story and you sound like this hyper-competent hero, human intuition naturally kicks in.
Oh, here we go.
The interviewer's brain immediately looks for the catch. They think, okay, you're great, but what's the hidden tax here?
Right. What are you hiding? Yeah.
Exactly. Which leads inevitably to the ultimate stress test.
Ah, yes. The pivot from hero to liability. They lean back, they interlock their fingers, and they hit you with what is arguably the hardest, most cliche question in the corporate playbook. So, what is your biggest weakness?
The ubiquitous trap.
It really is, and I have a deeply embarrassing confession to make here.
Oh, please share.
Early in my career, sitting in those uncomfortable chairs, I absolutely fell into the trap of giving fake, heavily sanitized answers to this question.
We all did.
I would put on my most serious, contemplative face and say, honestly, my biggest weakness is just that I work too hard. I care too much about getting the details right.
Oh, the classic, "I'm just a perfectionist."
Yes. The disguised compliment, it is so cringeworthy looking back. It feels incredibly sycophantic.
Sycophantic is the perfect word.
You're just eagerly fawning over the corporate ideal, trying to disguise a brag as a flaw. You think you're playing 4D chess, but you just sound like a robot.
Because it completely lacks authenticity. It simply doesn't ring true. You have to remember, recruiters hear that exact same platitude 10 times a day.
At least 10.
When you give a polished fake answer like, "I'm a perfectionist," you are signaling to the interviewer that you are either entirely lacking in self-awareness or you are hiding behind corporate speak to obscure the truth.
And neither of those makes you an attractive, safe hire.
Not at all.
But hold on. Let me inject a dose of reality here because conceptually I agree with you,
Okay.
but practically, when you're actually sitting in that chair, isn't it terrifying to hand a recruiter a very real reason not to hire you?
It feels terrifying, yes.
If I'm interviewing for a high-stakes project management role, and I admit I genuinely struggle with delegating tasks, aren't I just handing them a loaded gun? Why would I voluntarily give them ammunition to disqualify me when there are 50 other perfect on-paper candidates out in the lobby?
Because the premise of that fear is flawed.
Mhm.
You are operating under the assumption that the interviewer believes those 50 other candidates are actually perfect.
And they don't.
They absolutely do not. They know perfection is a myth. They aren't asking the weakness question to find a reason to eliminate you. It is an emotional regulation test.
An emotional regulation test. Break that down.
They want to see how you handle a threat to your ego in real time. If you deflect, you show fragility. The key is to talk about a real skill that you are actively improving and show them the architecture of your growth.
The architecture of your growth. That's a beautiful way to frame it.
Let me share a personal struggle to illustrate this, because I used to get this so wrong. Early in my career, I suffered profoundly from public speaking anxiety.
Wait, really? You?
Oh, completely. It wasn't just a minor flutter of nerves either. It was paralyzing stage fright. The visceral panic of standing in front of a room of executives would completely short-circuit my thought process.
It's fascinating to hear you say that now, given what we do for a living.
I know, right? But back then, it was a massive liability. So if I were in an interview back then, I wouldn't hide it, but I wouldn't just dump the problem on their desk either.
Right. You don't just say, I'm terrified of speaking and leave it there.
Exactly. I would say, historically, my biggest weakness has been public speaking. I used to experience severe anxiety presenting to large groups. So to systematically dismantle that fear, I started practicing every single day.
Okay, stop right there. Notice the structure. You didn't just confess a flaw. You paired it with a robust tactical blueprint for recovery.
Exactly. And then I would explain the specific tactical steps.
Yeah.
Joining a speaking group, recording myself on video to analyze my pacing, actively volunteering to lead low-stakes internal meetings to build tolerance.
Stating a real struggle, followed by detailing your daily practice routine, it proves two highly salient points to the employer.
What are those?
First, you have the integrity to admit a vulnerability. You are trustworthy. You aren't going to hide a server crash from them.
Right.
And second, you are fundamentally adaptable. In a rapidly changing corporate landscape, the ability to recognize a personal deficit and systematically engineer a way to improve upon it is exponentially more valuable than pretending to be flawless from day one.
Because if you pretend to be flawless, when you inevitably make a mistake on the job 6 months later, their first thought is going to be, what else are they hiding?
Exactly. By owning the weakness up front, you are showing them exactly how you handle failure and friction. You remove the mystery.
You are de-risking yourself as an investment. You're saying, I am a work in progress, but I am the architect of that progress.
I love that. I am the architect of that progress. So you've navigated the choppy waters. You've proven your competence through a compelling problem-solving narrative, completely bypassing the dry Wikipedia summary.
Yeah.
You've proven your authenticity and resilience by admitting a real weakness, like the public speaking example, and clearly mapping out how you're actively working on it.
Check.
Now the clock is running out. You reach the end of the allotted time. The interviewer closes their folder, looks at you, and asks the final inevitable question. Do you have any questions for us?
The absolute non-negotiable rule here is that you cannot say no.
Never say no.
Saying no, I think you covered everything, is the conversational equivalent of a flatline. It shows a complete lack of intellectual engagement with the reality of the position. You must always ask a question.
But it needs to be highly strategic, right? You don't just ask where the break room is.
Oh, please don't. This specific question that fundamentally alters the dynamic of the room is this. What does success look like in this role?
What does success look like in this role?
It is incredibly direct. And asking this specific question conceptually frames you as a winner before they have even made an offer.
Okay, I can feel the collective anxiety of everyone listening to this right now.
Oh, yeah?
Because my immediate thought is, does walking in and asking about success make you seem incredibly presumptuous?
I could see how you'd feel that way.
There's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, you know? Is there a risk of sounding like you're already measuring the drapes for your corner office before you've even secured the job? Doesn't it rub people the wrong way if you act like you're already on the payroll?
That is a completely valid hesitation. But we need to step back and analyze the broader power dynamics at play in that room.
Okay, let's look at the power dynamics.
Throughout the entire hour you've been sitting there, the dynamic has been heavily skewed. They hold the resources, the salary, the title, the opportunity, and you are requesting access to those resources.
It's the traditional subservient audition. Please pick me.
Yes. The tone inherently leans toward please pick me. When you ask, what does success look like in this role? You are radically shifting that dynamic. You aren't asking about vacation days or benefits.
You're elevating the conversation.
You are transforming the interaction from an audition into a collaborative, forward-looking discussion between peers. You are stepping entirely out of the job seeker archetype and firmly planting yourself in the problem solver archetype.
You're essentially asking, if I step into this ecosystem, what metric are we trying to hit? How do we win together?
Exactly. And on a purely psychological level, it acts as a cognitive anchor. To answer your question, the interviewer is forced to visualize you succeeding in the position.
Oh, that's brilliant.
They literally have to mentally place you in the role, accomplishing their specific objectives in order to articulate the answer. You leave the room not as a question mark or just a list of bullet points, but as a conceptualized winner in their own imagination.
It's not a trick, though. It's an alignment strategy.
Right, it has to be genuine.
You're forcing them to articulate their deepest professional desires for this role. And by being the catalyst for that vision, you instantly become associated with the solution. It demonstrates that you aren't just looking to collect a paycheck and hide in a cubicle. You are looking to generate measurable impact.
It proves you understand that business is fundamentally about outcomes, not just activities.
Let's pull all of these threads together and distill this deep dive into our 3 core tactical takeaways. If you are prepping for an interview right now, here is your playbook.
Ready?
First, avoid the Wikipedia summary of your resume. Your resume is the data. Your interview is the narrative. Be a problem solver through the story. Focus on a specific crisis and map out how you intuitively dismantled the friction.
Perfect. Second, do not fall into the perfectionist trap when asked about your weakness. Show genuine adaptability by admitting a real struggle, like my paralyzing stage fright, and detailing the specific daily practices and blueprint you use to overcome it.
And third, frame yourself as a peer by asking, what does success look like in this role as your closing move? The real underlying mechanism here is that these tools give you the power to completely alter the atmosphere of the room.
You take a terrifying, unbalanced interrogation where you feel like a commodity, and you turn it into a confident, memorable conversation between equals.
You are reclaiming your agency in a systemic process that is, let's be honest, historically designed to strip it away from you.
That is so true.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We just spent a lot of time talking about how asking, what does success look like in this role, forces the interviewer to mentally visualize you winning. It anchors you to their goals.
Yes, the cognitive anchor.
But think about the epistemological flip side of that dynamic. When they finally answer that question, what are they revealing about themselves and about the company's culture?
That is the critical pivot right there. You have to listen closely to the subtext of their answer.
Right. If they answer your question about success by describing a grueling 80-hour work week where success means answering emails at 2 in the morning on a Sunday and sacrificing your personal life, well, they just handed you a massive piece of data.
They just showed you their true hand.
Exactly.
Yes.
Does their definition of success actually align with your boundaries? Or is it a glaring neon red flag that this isn't the right job for you after all? The interview isn't just a one-way street where they judge your worth. It is deeply about you auditing their ecosystem to see if it deserves your talent.
Because the ultimate goal is never just to get the offer. The goal is to find an environment where your definition of impact fundamentally aligns with theirs.
Take control of the room, define what winning looks like for yourself, and let's go out there and succeed together.